don't have to worry. I don't have to fear. I can be at peace. I don't have to be, all anxious about circumstances and events because I know that the ultimate reality is that I cannot be harmed. We cannot be harmed. Even though the body can be harmed. The body is, I hate to say it out loud, but the body is in a state of deterioration. It's just happening. We can slow it down. But we are not a body. We are spirit. And we live and move and have our being in spirit. So we've been talking about this, the science of happiness for the past few weeks. And some Course in Miracles students have questioned this whole idea. Here we live in this world that's an illusion, and it's, it really is we're never really going to be happy here, that we're never going to really find this true happiness until, we return to spirit, until we return to love, till we actually return to God. But the way we actually return is by changing our minds. We change our minds about what our life is. We change our mind about the appearances of the world until we change our mind enough that we get to a certain place in perspective that we are actually ready to be gathered back up into the arms of spirit. And so the idea of actually designing our own lives and being really accountable for our lives and making decisions that lead to a better frame of mind and therefore a better experience in the world, that's really what we need to be doing here. Not just sitting around waiting. You sit, like I told you, my friend in California who's a beginning student, he keeps saying that God just needs to take a hand here. God just needs to step in here and take over. And but that's really not what God does. God would not. We've said many times, God will not force His goodness upon us, but it's available to us all the time. So today real quick. I'll do a quick review. That there's been some scientific research into happiness in recent years and how it works and why some people are happier than other people and what you can do about it. And the basics of it are that there's some components that go along with this state of happiness, and 50% of it is genetic predisposition. So genetic predisposition has a large role in the level of happiness that we attain. But it's important that I say that that's predisposition. It doesn't mean that it's preordained. It means that we have tendencies, that 50% of our level of happiness is because of tendencies that we've inherited. And you could say some of them are inherited, in different, but in any event, these things also can be helped. And 10% of the criteria is life experience. Sometimes we think that when we hear that only 10% of our level of happiness depends upon our life experience. Many times it seems as if all of it depends upon our life experience. That if terrible things happen, how in the world am I ever going to be happy? Well, it turns out that our fear of terrible things happening is actually much more severe and debilitating than the terrible things happening. Because we have these built-in capability of getting over bad things happening. We get over them and we move on. And now this has all been anecdotal for many years, but now there's been a lot of research into this, and they find out, they asked a group of people about their fears of having health catastrophes, and one of the things that they asked was, if you had to go in and get dialysis because your kidneys were failing, how do you feel about that experience? How would you feel? And people were very like, oh, it would be horrible. My life would be ruined. It would be just the worst thing. And then they went and interviewed the people who are actually in dialysis, and they related a similar thought that they thought previously that their life would be horrible if something like that were to occur to them. But when they really looked into it deeply, they found that their levels of happiness was pretty much the same as the folks who weren't going to dialysis. So it's because we have this ability. So when bad things happen, then it's bad, I mean, for a time. But we get over it. We have a natural tendency to get over it. Sometimes we get caught in ruminations and we stay in it for longer than we need to, but we have a natural tendency to get over it and move on. Well, then the 40% that's left over, that's totally our habits and what we decide to do. So 40% of our ability to maintain high levels of happiness in this world of illusions is up to us and what we decide to do. And so that leads me to why the sign out there this morning says, depending on which side you're coming from, it says able response or responsible. So this 40%, this is the 40% that we're responsible for. And it's one of the 12 attributes of happy people. Now, not everybody has all 12, and as a matter of fact, it's few people that actually are able to maintain all 12 of these attributes of happiness, which we're covering week by week. But there's 3 that were the most important and seem to have the most effect. And the first one was gratitude. To be grateful for life, to be grateful, to have a sense of gratitude. The second one was this ability to connect to other people. So strong ties to friends, family, fellowship. Some group that we felt like we were part of that was bigger than ourselves. This is one of the biggest things for people who were experiencing quite a bit of loneliness. It was recommended that you need to get involved with a group and that you can relate to and associate with, and it works. It works. A sense of so people who have strong family ties, people who have strong ties in their community and actually participate. And then the third thing was the ability to give service. So those are the big 3. That people who are able to do those 3 things seem to have the highest level of happiness. Now this one today about being responsible is tied up with the ability to deal with life's ups and downs, the ability to deal with trauma, the ability to deal with unfortunate things that occur. And this is this is where the ego really tries to steal our happiness from us, because we see so much. Every Sunday, I don't think Sunday goes by where I don't mention it. But if you watch television, there's no way you can avoid it. If you listen to the radio, there's no way you can avoid it. There's these negative reports just keep coming into us. And the tendency is to look at these bad things that are happening in the world. They generate fear right away. But we look at them and we naturally begin to have judgments concerning these things that are happening in the world. A lot of times we experience a sense of powerlessness, that we cannot, that there's, we're caught in this dangerous world, and who knows when something, that could happen here, that could happen to me, but for the grace of God, go I, all these things come into our minds, and so it reinforces the very things that will keep us from happiness, which reinforces the idea that we're alone in a dangerous world and we are continually under threat. And this is why this meditation this morning was really important, was the idea of, because that's what, I have to change my mind. I have to change my mind to realize that really, past all the illusion of the world, I am safe and sound in the arms of Spirit. And that's eternal. That's this thing that we're doing right now, that's temporary. It's going to pass. And we all know it's going to pass. Our observation is the longer that we live, the more observation we have that this thing that we're involved in right now is going to pass. And nobody can, we all have some ideas about what happens next. but none of us can prove it. But we can be pretty sure that something's going to happen. And so we change our mindset to come to the mindset that in that ultimate reality we are okay. We are safe and sound. And I love this saying that not only is God with us, but that we actually are in God. So, and that's where the safety comes from, right? And the symbols here about everything that's provided, that what sustains us, and it really is just symbols. They're really using food and water and those things as symbols for whatever it is that we need is really being provided. So what do we do when things go wrong? What do we do? Well, my tendency is to blame somebody. It's somebody's fault that this is going wrong. I blame myself. A lot of times I will go right to, I'm saying it's my fault, this and that, but that's uncomfortable. That's more uncomfortable than me blaming you. So after a few minutes of considering that it's my fault, I'm going to try to figure out some way that it's your fault, or somebody's fault, and whose fault is so convenient for it to be somebody else's fault who has different opinions than I have. It's so easy. I mean, we've drawn these battle lines that just seem to be getting more and more concentrated. That no dialogue going on either side of any argument. So anyway, but this is really a distraction from solving the problems. So this is one of the. Well, let me go through a couple of things here. First of all, confidence is really important in overcoming these problems that occur with us. A confidence in ourselves, and not confidence in the ego, not confidence in our personality to overcome these things, but a confidence in that presence of God that is within us. And many times I've said this, that it's a quiet confidence. It's not a boastful thing. It's just a confidence of knowing that we have this inner strength that is not of our small self. That we have this inner strength that is really provided by our divine parent. And that we can be confident that no matter what happens, that we can get through it. And this is really where it starts, is that an attitude of confidence, not being worried. Now see, the problem is if we actually believe that we've got to take care of it, that we have to take care of everything, that it's all on us, we may actually be very good at getting things done and fixing stuff and getting in there and making it all work out, but we're not going to be happy. We're going to be put upon. We're going to be worn out. We're going to feel burdened down. But when we start to think about this inner strength, and then the other thing is expectations. I don't expect bad things to happen. I allow for the fact that occasionally they do happen, and it's weird. The more I look for them, the more they happen. It seems like, but I expect the best. I expect the best from life. Now, this is a fine distinction, but it's an important one. I try very hard not to expect things from people. When I say expect things from people, what I mean is I'm trying to release the roles that I have assigned to people. And it's not just me. I didn't just assign the roles. We've got these relationships that are common relationships that everybody has, and there's like certain rules and regulations, some unwritten, that are supposed to go along with that relationship. And if people don't act the way that we've got the rules set up, then, of course, we find fault. We find blame. And we judge. And it interferes with our ability to be happy. So, and I've got a number of stories about this. I'm not going to tell them today. I'm just going to say that when I stopped putting expectations on people, they began to surprise me in wonderful ways. And so it continues today. But I do expect the best from life. And even in the midst of a problem, I have got my mind to the place where it could be a horrible situation. I feel just horrible, but I know, and it starts with a thought, that I know that there's an opportunity for good somewhere in this situation. Not that the situation is good, look, people die. People get in accidents. People that we know are injured or ill. And so it's just crazy to go into some kind of strange denial where we try to say that that's good. That's not good. The good is that at every turn, at every point in life, God is offering what we call goodwill, the best for everyone involved. So there's an opportunity right there. There's this pathway we can take. We can take the pathway, down to despair and upset, and sometimes we do, and it takes a while because there's grieving involved. There's a number of things involved. But the point is, at every moment, we can decide to move from that path to a path of happiness. And Spirit, which was in the meditation too, Spirit will provide us with the guidance as to what to do next. In other words, we don't have to figure it out in our ego. So we remember that worry is negative prayer, and this is part of dealing with life events, is that when we find ourselves worrying, we're actually praying for the thing we're worrying about. We're praying for that thing to happen. And sometimes it does. But it doesn't even really matter whether it happens or not, because we're suffering in the midst of the worry. And we're cheating ourselves out of that opportunity for a moment of happiness. Okay, so now we're going to come down to the nuts and bolts of it, and this is what's in the lesson for there's a lesson for every day this week. It'll be on the website. It's in the little thing you've got there. But in order for us to be able to get this habit that leads to more happiness, we have to begin with saying that we are responsible for our own actions. That we are responsible for what we do. And this is really where change begins. Change begins if we are doing things that we feel guilty about, if we are doing things that are harmful to ourselves or others. The first thing we have to do is stop doing that. I mean, nothing can happen. In other words, what I want to say is, we cannot just think our way into better action. We have to, but we can begin by acting ourselves into better things. If we decide. So here's a real simple thing, and this is one of the main tenets of how the Course begins to work in us, is this idea of, first of all, you don't have to do anything. So it seems kind of the opposite. I'm talking about action, but I'm talking about not doing anything. That's an action. Okay, first thing is stop. You don't have to do anything. When somebody says that insulting thing, when somebody does something that we don't like, when all of a sudden a fearful event just pops up in our life, you don't have to do anything. Stop for a second. Just stop. Relax. In other words, don't react, right? It just needs a moment. So we just relax for a moment and we stop. And this is actually in the recovery programs, this is called abstinence. Don't pick up the first one. Stop. And this is such a powerful principle, is the ability to say, okay, I'm not forced to do anything. So I'm going to stop for a second and I'm going to allow something to happen within that is going to guide me in what's the next thing to do. I'm not just going to react out of fear. I'm not going to react out of anger. I'm going to sit. So sometimes that's all you have to do, and people think you're like the Buddha. People think you're like so peaceful because you could be raging inside, but you stopped and didn't do anything, right? It's a good example to set. So how it works is, action comes from feelings. I have a feeling and it prompts me to act. Feelings come from thoughts. Thoughts come from belief systems, which belief systems are just a thought system. A belief system is just a group of thoughts. And this is the hierarchy of things, and this is what we're responsible for. So first, I'm not going to act. No matter what the feeling is, I'm not going to just jump off the cliff. The next is to understand that I'm responsible for my feelings. I'm responsible for my feelings, and I have to know that these are the things that motivate me to act in a certain way. So they are, and they can also immobilize us. So it's not just stopping and considering. It's like being stopped because I'm scared to death and I can't do anything. I'm like frozen. I can't move. These feelings do this. So we've heard it said many times. We may have even said it. I can't help how I feel. That's just how I feel. I can't help it. But it turns out we can. This is very interesting. And I remember the first time I considered this idea, I thought that these feelings just came. These feelings just come. I mean, things happen, and that's the way I feel, and that's how it is. But it turns out that the feeling is triggered by a thought. And once I started to get this discipline, so I get a feeling that's unpleasant. I can do it with pleasant ones too, but I get a feeling that's unpleasant, and I would say to myself, well, what was I thinking? Because that's the step that came before. What was I thinking? What was the thought that was in my mind that triggered that feeling? And this is really where the rubber meets the road. This is where we really can start changing how our life really seems to us. The way it looks, the way it feels, is by saying, I am responsible for my thoughts. I understand that my thoughts are the triggers for my feelings. I'm going to take responsibility for my thoughts. We go, well, geez, thoughts just come. And actually they do. Thoughts just spring into our mind, and it can be kind of an interesting exercise to track them back. Have you ever been like sitting and all of a sudden you're thinking about some crazy thing and you go, how did I get from there to here? Sometimes it even happens in conversations, right?